So you're going to have more than just static situations. I've mentioned this in other clips that are involved with trying to get your training partners back. And many of the situations that you get involved in are going to be what people would typically refer to as scramble situations. You just put your training partner down to the mat and all of a sudden both athletes start moving very quickly. One athlete's trying to, recover guard and face, and the other athlete, is trying to manage to get hooks in, take the back, or at least stay in position to take the back, whatever the case may be, right? So it's these situations that I'm concerned about in these next series of clips. And what I'm going to try to do is give you the tools to make sure that the scramble is no longer this thing that people look at and say, oh man, yeah, that guy just wanted it more. And that's why, that's why he won the scramble, right? What we want to have some technical details that actually help us be the ones that end up on the winning end of potential scramble situations. Okay. One of them is following your opponent's hips. Okay. Now, what do I mean by this? Okay. My training partner is going to be down on the mat. His knees and elbows are going to be down like so. Okay. And when we talk about following the hips, there's a few different, kind of protocol to follow. The easiest protocol to follow involve when my training partner makes lateral turns, okay, from this position. So lateral turn, just kind of do like a barrel roll over one side, right? Like he would recover guard on that side or potentially roll on the other side. Not a Granby or anything, just rolling down to the hips, right? These are the kind of rolls that I'm talking about, okay? And these very often happen as you're about to try to take your training partners back. Your training partner will often bring his hips to either side, okay? Usually if he rolls his hips, kind of away, he's performing a Granby. If he turns his hips towards, he's trying to do some sort of guard recovery, whatever the case may be. And there's a few different ways in which we could deal with all of those. All right, but the main one, main skill that we want to develop is an ability to match my training partner's hips, to keep my training partner's hips between my two knees. Now, whatever grips I get, okay, some are better than others in terms of following your training partner. We've talked about this before. But it doesn't really matter what grips we get. The knees following your training partner's hips, it doesn't really change anything dependent upon the grip that you get, all right, for the most part. So whether you have seat belt or a chest lock or, a claw grip, most of the time this is going to be true no matter what those grips are that you have. For the time being, I'll just stick with a seat belt. Now, you can set yourself up for success by positioning your hips farther behind your training partner from the beginning. If my hips are out here and away from my training partner, I make it much harder to follow the hips. Okay? So the sooner when we get into a back exposure situation that we can get here where this knee is outside my training partner's hip already, the better. Okay? If I, for example, like I said, stay this far away, when he goes to turn to get into guard, it's so hard for me to match my knees to his hips, okay? So let's set ourselves up for success. The moment we get into this position in a scramble, boom, my knees go around my training partner's hips to the best of my ability. It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to be here on your training partner, right? You're going to have one knee on the mat and one knee kind of across your training partner's hip. Now, as he goes to try to recover guard, go ahead. You're going to dive your knee underneath your training partner's hip like so, and your two knees will pinch around your training partner's hips. Okay, let's go back. Now, same thing would be true if we got into this scramble situation, okay, and my training partner starts, kind of sitting and facing away from me. Away. Right, same thing. My knee stays underneath my training partner's hips. My other knee stays around the hip. Okay, it's a less common reaction, of course, because he kind of is surrendering the back. But nonetheless, we need to be ready for it, because sometimes what will happen is he'll roll this way. We go to try to follow him. Maybe he goes to try to roll back the other direction. I put my head on the menace, and I'm always ready to get these knees behind. Now, that's kind of a relevant skill to develop as well, that kind of head on the mat thing that I just showed there. Okay? When we get in these positions, and my training partner hops that hip to the floor, right? And maybe he goes back up to his knees. When you have a seatbelt like this, and he tries to go back up to the knees, and you're trying to stop him, if you stay here, and he comes up to his knees, you can kind of lose your training partner in positions like this. Okay? So anytime you have that seatbelt, and your training partner tries to kind of come back, you put your head on the mat. Go ahead, come back. Back up to your knees. Your knees. Right. You put your head on the mat and you can match his hips again. He goes down to the mat. You put your knee underneath his hips. He goes to put his knees down on the floor. You put your forehead on the floor. And you're ready to follow the hips at all times. No matter where this guy is, he stays in the cradle of your knees. Okay? Anytime your training partner's hips get outside the cradle of your knees, go to the other side. Your training partner has a great chance of beating you in the scramble. Okay? So no matter how it happens, how you take your training partner down, one of the most important details of maintaining control over the back and winning the scramble is to keep your training partner between the cradle of your knees. Okay? Let's take a look at another common situation that we end up in where, our training partner could potentially, start moving around and win the battles, for position and make it so that I don't get an opportunity to take his back. Okay. Basically we're not fully satisfied until we have 2 hooks in or a figure 4 body lock, something controlling on our training partner. So, sometimes what happens in the midst of maneuvering around your training partner, regardless of grip, whether it's hands underneath your training partner like so, or seatbelt, or whatever it is that you guys end up with, you end up in a situation where you're in a seated position behind your training partner, but you haven't gotten both hooks in yet. Or I should say, you haven't even gotten 1 hook in yet, okay? And we're in a situation where they're sitting in front, we're sitting behind. We still have the access at the back that we would normally be looking for, but we're kind of stuck with this seated position, okay? Whenever this sort of thing happens, this is referred to as a crab ride, okay? Whenever this sort of thing happens, I want to try to create a situation where I can develop as much space between my training partner's knee and chest and knee and elbow as I possibly can. Sometimes you can get away with the very basic strategy of just bringing your knees up towards your chest, placing the toes inside the hip line, and just throwing hooks in like so. Once you score 1 hook, okay, well, we have procedures for getting a secondary hook in, okay, even if I'm struggling. So a focus for the time being of basically just getting 1 hook in. We'll talk about how we go from 1 hook to 2 in a later video, okay? But for the time being, just we get 1 in, that's going to be considered a win. So if I can just bring that foot up to the hip line and shoot through, that's great. What you'll notice is that if you try to insert the foot any other way, like even if he's not actually actively trying to defend, you're going to run into this guy's hand and arms, even just by mistake. So it's hard to throw a hook in like this, okay? To just throw my foot like so, all right? However, if you retract the knee in and look to score right inside the hip line here, that's where the biggest space is, okay? And we can enter like so, okay? Your training partner is probably going to want to stop that, and they can use 1 or both potential hands to stop that from happening. So one of the things you can start to do is you can either bait your training partner into getting control over his wrists with your feet, okay? Depending on the way that he grabs, okay? So I could get a cross wrist if he goes and grabs like so. I gotta get a cross wrist here, whether my arm is over his shoulder, under his shoulder, whatever the case may be, okay? That's one way I could do it. So let's do this for a seatbelt now, same thing. He goes for a cross, I get a cross wrist grip, okay? And now I could potentially throw the foot in on this side, maybe, okay? Or even on this side, okay? But now my training partner will use this hand to interfere, okay? So if that helps me and just getting 1 wrist is enough on either side, great. If it's not enough, okay, and I feel my training partner defending, the best way to get him to defend in a way that gets the other wrist, okay, is either to threaten the strangle, that gives me cross wrists, or, if I'm a little worried about like losing control or something initially, okay, when I'm threatening to strangle, no problem. I can also threaten throwing the foot in the inside. That will also give me cross wrist potential, okay? If I have 2 arms underneath my training partner, okay, and we start things off, go ahead. We get a hold of 1 wrist and I have 2 arms underneath my training partner. It's a little bit more difficult to make this happen. So I might recommend at some point taking that secondary arm out, okay? If you want to just maintain your 2-on-1 control, you can, but just know that you're going to have a little bit of a tougher time controlling your training partner's other wrist. Okay, sometimes you can reach out and you can get 1-on-1s like so, and you might be able to make that work. Okay, if we want cross wrist grips, we're pretty much going to have a situation where 1 arm comes out like so. Okay, So let's look at this again. Basic insertion, foot through the hip, if we can, okay? If I want something more complicated, a more complicated insertion, I go to try to put feet inside, I get a hold of a wrist, okay? I go to try to put the other foot inside, okay? I get a hold of the wrist either with the same side arm, and now I have two of my training partner's wrists, okay? Or I pull one arm out, I threaten to strangle or the foot across, and I get that cross wrist. And from here, I can start stepping feet inside my training partner's hips. Another thing that can help kind of take your training partner's knees away from his chest is extending into your training partner's legs. And you can combine that with all the motions that we talked about, okay? I can combine extension into the legs, all right, with potentially reaching, getting a hold of one of my training partner's arms. I can go back into the leg extension, right? Maybe I go to put the other foot in ahead. I get a hold, all right? Now maybe my training partner's really going knees to chest hard, right? Really wants to defend. It's hard. I'm having a tough time. I can always extend those feet out. Another thing that helps me, okay, aside from a leg extension here, okay, is feet on top of my training partner's thighs. Even if you don't quite have the hook fully in yet, bring your knees towards your chest. If you have an opportunity to step on the thigh, you can fight the foot in, okay? So here, knees to chest, step on the thigh, fight the foot in. Now we got that one hook, and we're ready to get the second one, okay? So we've got an interplay here between inserting at the line of the hips, controlling our training partner's hands when they go in for defense. Go ahead. Okay, potentially one-on-ones. Okay, you go fight the other one, right? Like so. Okay, what cross wrist position. Okay, if I'm in a seatbelt situation, it would probably be cross wrist. And then I can start fighting. And then the addition of either extension, like so. When he tries to bring his knees to his chest, it's hard because of my foot position. Okay, or I should say, feet on top of thighs. As knees come to chest on either side, pushing down, getting a hook, pulling my training partner towards one side, and when you start to take the back like so. So let's take a look at crossbody ride and see how crossbody ride can be considered a scramble position and what kind of things that we can do to try to make sure that we're going to win when we're in that sort of position, okay? Crossbody ride is usually a technique that we use to try to expose our training partner's back, but it's somewhat symmetrical, and it makes it so that your training partner could actually expose your back when you're in the position. So it's important to have some of the details for how we might go about potentially winning when we get into that somewhat even position. So I'll just have my training partner go to turtle position, and we'll get to crossbody ride in a super simple way, okay? I'm just going to lean back with my hooks in. If you wanted to enter like we did earlier in the DVD, you can go from a chest lock situation, knee inside, or get crotch lock, and then throw our legs in, right? Now, let's rotate so that your head towards the camera. All right. So we get in this situation. So most of the time what you see is someone penduluming their legs and eventually moving themselves in towards the upper body, all right, to finish taking the back. Okay, and this is typically what we see. All right, but you have to understand that when you get to this position, it is possible for your training partner to be the one that does that to you. Okay, so if I allow my training partner to kick my legs down, go ahead, and lift my hips, he can begin to take my back. Go ahead and do it. Right. So it becomes relevant to understand how to win in this position. And this position itself can turn into somewhat of a scramble. Training partner is going to be doing his absolute best to not get his back taken. You're going to do your absolute best to take his back and not get your back taken. So what kinds of things can we do to make things harder for my training partner and make things easier for me than to make sure that I win in this situation and actually get behind my training partner? Okay, one of the first, okay, is if I can get my training partner's knee down to the ground, okay, or foot down to the ground. Okay, so if I put my foot on the back of my training partner's Achilles tendon and I put my training partner's foot down to the ground, it's pretty tough for my training partner to beat me here, okay? So as far as extending legs is concerned, to expose your training partner's back, If I just extend from a figure four, that's good. It's not bad. But if my training partner fights me, just like, you don't even use your hand, just kick. Get right. My training partner fights me, it might not be enough to actually fully expose the back. We still stay in this even position. And if I ever get lax, my hips will rise, and then I'll get my back taken, right? Okay, so one thing we can do is just very quickly put a foot on the end of the Achilles tendon, maximize our leverage here. So instead of just locking in at the knee, and we just push down on our training partner's leg, bring the foot down towards the floor, knee down towards the floor, and now we're in pretty good shape. Right? Once you're here, you can just keep pressure on your training partner's leg. It's hard for him to get back from this position. It's not impossible. If he hand fights a little bit, maybe gets my foot off, whatever the case may be, he might be able to come back. Now, another thing that will help me win in this situation and make it very difficult for my training partner to win is hip positioning. Typically, the more my hips start to face the ceiling, the easier it is for my training partner to expose my back. So the more I face an upright position, as my training partner pushes down, the more my hips rise. If I can manage to take an angle on my training partner and bring this knee down to the floor, okay, when my training partner goes to try to kick and bring my hips up off the mat, it's difficult. It almost just creates a situation as he kicks where I can bring my training partner's knee down to the floor fairly easy and start to win this battle, okay? So what I can't allow is I can't allow my training partner to use his body to change the angle of my hips. So I scoop my hips out like so, and I might even add that foot at the end of my training partner's Achilles tendon. Okay? Now, once I get here, you're often going to see me remove myself from this foot over foot position, because what I don't want is my training partner to start getting a hold of my legs and potentially attacking me here. So it's good to start things off to expose my training partner's back, but once I get here, I don't leave this foot dangling. I tuck it in nice and tight, and I get a good, strong figure four. Now when he goes to try to beat me, my hips are underneath his. He tries to kick down, all of these things. It's a very difficult thing for my training partner to do, okay? So as far as back exposure is concerned, we have working at the end of the lever, okay? That's definitely one part of the equation. But another part of the equation is getting my hips out. You can use a little bit of both. All right, you could use one or the other to potentially, beat your training partner. But either way, the more my hips face the ceiling, okay, the less I have leverage at the end of the lever. Go ahead, start kicking. The more I get my back exposed, okay? Now, another thing we might be interested in doing here, okay, is developing a procedure at which I could actually get my training partner's back. Because one of the things you'll notice is even if you start to win in this situation, when I go try to reach for my training partner, keep your back on the mat, okay? When I go trying to reach for my training partner's back, he can use his hands. Just post on me, right? He can keep me away here and keep me in situations where it's actually pretty hard to access my training partner's back. My recommendations, as far as actually getting to the back and not being slowed down so much from here, are to start attacking your training partner at the near leg first, okay? If I present a threat to the leg, my training partner will have to involve his hands in such a way that makes it easier for me to get to the upper body, okay? So let's take a look at some of the things we can threaten the legs with, okay? Something as simple as locking my hands. Now, do I think this is really going to be a real submission that's going to tap anybody? No. All right, but I can extend my training partner from here. It's annoying, it puts pressure, and then I can start climbing my training partner's arm, okay? And once you have the arm, it's pretty easy to start getting to your training partner's neck and shoulders, okay? Once you get to the neck and shoulders, we can work to extend my training partner and eventually get this secondary hook in, okay? So, put this back. Good. All right, so that's one way we can do it. We can keep things super simple, okay? Something slightly more successful, if you're ever able to put this leg behind your head. This is a little bit more real. You can actually create like a hip lock sensation on your training partner, okay? From a position like that, just stuffing the foot behind the head and kind of cupping at the top of the thigh. All right, you can create some more extension. But again, if the goal is to take the back as he starts to disrupt this, I just start feeding to my training partner's upper body, okay? So that's one good thing, all right? Another thing I can do is reach around this ankle, and I can start to turn, all right, out, okay? My training partner will start to reach with the hands. Again, my goal here is not to teach you how to submit people so much in this DVD from Crossbody Ride, but for you to actually just access the back. But these are things that you can threaten your training partner with. Honestly, even just grabbing the foot is going to cause your training partner probably to start reaching. But if you want some more realistic threats, another good one is grabbing the top of the toes and reaching in front like so and covering your own hand and start rotating the foot. And again, I'll start to get this arm. Okay. I have other DVDs where I cover, more specifically how I'm attacking legs from there. Right. But for the time being, just worried about getting a hold of this arm. Once I get a hold of this arm, it's pretty easy to move to the upper body. Okay. I'll just work my way to my training partner's shoulder now through pulling the arm and driving my hips in. Once I get to that shoulder and trap, we get to this position where we don't quite have 2 hooks in, knees to chest. Okay, for now, we'll do a simple extension and just throw the hook in. We'll talk about how to go from 1 hook to 2 hooks later on. All right, so there's some details, how to win the situation where we're in crossbody ride. Oh, there's one more thing I forgot, as this occasionally happens. Okay, let's say you're about to get beat. Okay, my training partner kicks his hips down towards the mat. If I stay here and I continue to face away from my training partner and I keep fighting to try to get back to the original position, as he fights, go ahead, he will eventually beat me and take my back. If instead, as I realize I'm losing, I push my legs across my training partner's body, I have a good shot at just getting on top, potentially, okay, which isn't bad. I didn't get to his back, but at least I don't get my back taken, okay? If he pops up when this happens, I can reach inside his hip and from here maneuver around my training partner's body to get to the back as well. So I have that cross body ride situation again. Okay. So any situation where I feel like I'm losing, I just vault my hips over my training partner and I land in this position like so. Right now I can either cross face and get on top, where our main focus now is getting the back. So that's not going to be my best option. If I can get a hold of the arm or inside the hip, all right, now I have a good shot at trying to take my training partner's back again. If you get a hold of the arm, you could literally sit, and now you're right back in crossbody ride. If you get a hold of the hip or your own hamstring, okay, I'm reaching inside my own knee here. You can also play this position fairly well to get to the back, and there'll often be opportunity to get a hold of the arm again, but even if there's not, and the arms come in tight, okay, as I come around the corner, I just switch to seatbelt. Okay, so anytime we start to lose this race, okay, we just vault our hips across our training partner and either get to top position or, again, talking about trying to take the back, okay, we look to get a hold of the hip, okay, or the arm, and we can re-expose the back. The next position we'll see is a little less of a scramble position per se, but it can be. The reason I refer to this as a scramble position in this case is it can be the deciding factor between whether or not you actually score on your opponent or they could potentially get out. And I look at that situation where you have 1 hook in and you're trying to get the second, or you're trying to get your figure 4 body lock. I look at that as a situation which is a bit of a scramble. You're in a rush to get to the true scoring position, which is going to be your figure 4 or potentially 2 hooks in. And your training partner knows this, so he's going to do everything he can when you have 1 hook in to try to prevent the second hook from coming in, knowing that he's going to get scored on and knowing that truly is what seals his fate. You see a lot of people, once they actually get their back taken, points scored on, it changes the dynamics of the match. It's very demoralizing. The person starts to think that there's not a chance that they're going to be able to win. Not everybody, but this happens to a lot of people. But they'll fight like hell when there's 1 hook in. All of a sudden things get a lot more passive once the actual hook comes in and the points are scored. Okay, so this can be a pretty volatile position when we have this 1 hook in. Now, again, remember, going along with what we talked about before, about constantly creating a bottom hook and making sure the bottom hook comes in first, okay? One of the things your training partner can do to make your life very difficult when you have 1 hook in is turn the situation from a bottom hook situation into a top hook situation. So anytime this starts to happen, never allow this. Always scoot your hips back underneath your training partner and reposition them so that the bottom hook is the one that's in and not the top hook. We can never be satisfied in situations where I only have this top hook. Okay, this is very dangerous. It's only a matter of time before this guy scoots his hips out Hips out. Just get your hips out. Right, and faces me. Okay? So when you're in this one hook situation, do your absolute best to tilt your training partner towards this side. It's usually pretty easy. It's easier than you think it would be. Let's scoot a little bit towards my left. Good. Okay, now I'd like to get my second hook in. Let's talk about a few reliable methods and enhancements that we could use. Okay, let's first talk about gaining some leverage on my training partner. Okay, if I'm just locked in at my training partner's chest, okay, and I'm just kind of arbitrarily locked at my training partner, maybe my ankles are just crossed or whatever the case may be, and I go trying to extend, bring everything in tight, it can be difficult. Okay, so I want to be able to open him up and then potentially place a hook in, right? So what I'll do is I'll adjust my hands so that they're higher on my training partner's head and neck. Okay, instead of just locking here, I slide them up. Okay, I can slide the bottom one up. I could slide the top one up. Okay, I could do a little bit of both. All right, but whatever I can to go more towards the top of my training partner's head. Obviously, at a certain point, he'll slip off. We don't want that. Okay, right here. The second thing we'll do is convert to a high ball ride. My leg locks over my training partner's hip like so. This is partially to help prevent my training partner from hipping out and facing me, even if I lost the upper body. Try to turn and face. It's difficult. I've now secured it into my training partner's hip, and I've gotten something great, which is a connection of my two legs. Just like locked hands in the standing position is very strong and robust. It feels good in terms of controlling your training partner. You don't feel like you're going to lose somebody. The same thing is true with locked legs. Anytime we can create a situation where our legs are locked, it's always going to be structurally a little bit more sound than if my legs are separated like this. Any point in time, my foot can go to the mat and you can get out. So locked legs, but not only locked legs, it's like here, you know, where my training partner's hips are mobile and he can hop, we can get back in that cross-body situation, all right? But here, over the top of my training partner's hip, like so, okay? If my training partner ever disassembles this high ball ride, I would never tell you it's a bad idea to go back to cross-body because, again, that connection of the legs is always a good thing, okay? So if the high ball ride is ever defeated, you can retrace your steps, go back to cross-body, and then you can work on getting upper body control again, and then maybe looking to dominate the hip again, okay? So you can walk back in that way. But you definitely don't want to just be hanging out here dangling with open legs, okay? We're looking for that high ball ride. Now, the other thing the high ball ride does, we're talking about increasing our leverage here, is it gives me a bite on my training partner's hips to start extending my training partner and getting that knee further from the chest. If I were to, for example, try to do that with the cross-body, move your foot, with the cross-body ride locked, keep your knees and elbows, everything together, and I just try to extend from here, it's not nearly as significant. Let's rotate. It's not nearly as significant. Put your knee down. Knee down. It's not nearly as significant when I lock above the hip and I pull, okay? I have a much better bite on my training partner's hips and much more of an effect on my training partner's knee to elbow connection, okay? So we talked about getting hands a little higher on our training partner's neck. We talk about getting a high ball ride as a good potential option to increase our leverage. Okay, now let's talk about inserting the foot. Okay, when I go to insert the foot, there's kind of a particular procedure I'm going to follow. I usually don't like a big arc to put the foot in. It's not wrong. You can do it. Okay, I've done it many times, okay? But it makes it much more likely that your training partner raises the knee at the last second. Okay, much more likely that your training partner puts his hand down and is able to block the foot. So my entry point almost always is the top of the hip. And the foot slides in like so, as opposed to a big arc. Okay, like I said, if you can pull off the arc and your training partner does nothing to defend, awesome. Okay, but I think that one's pretty straightforward. Okay, we have to think to perform this action, all right, to try to put the foot on the inside. Okay, so we're attacking at the hip, and then we would end up with our two hooks in, right? Okay, another situation that can develop here, like I said, so I'm going to start trying to put that foot in. Now my training partner's knee is going to come up, okay? Another effective move that I can do is push my training partner's thigh down with the foot, and this also helps me get that foot in. Okay, so not just inserting at the hip, but if there's still kind of a block here, we just push down on our training partner's knee, and now we can start getting our other leg inside our training partner's hip, okay? Now, we may end up in situations where there's a disruption with our training partner's hands, and we feel like we need to solve that problem because they're just doing such a good job using hands and elbows to stop us from coming in. He can use this hand. He can also use a cross-side hand, okay? We can usually eliminate the near hand pretty easily by covering it. You can physically grab the hand or you can grab the wrist, whatever you feel comfortable with. And you can often eliminate the far hand by forcing him to defend the strangle, okay? So I just get a hold of the near wrist and I force him to defend the strangle. Now, when I put my foot in like so, I only have to worry about defeating his leg. I don't have to worry about defeating the hands. If he ever goes back to trying to address the leg, I get to punch that strangle arm in, okay? And we can go and finish the choke. Okay, so you have a good dilemma working here, okay? Another way that we could accomplish this potentially, okay, as we're in this position, is when if I ever feel my training partner reaching across, I can always get that cross grip and another cross grip here. Okay, now I have both my training partner's arms restricted, same thing. Okay, I won't have as much of an ability to extend my training partner, but there's no longer hands beating me here. So when his knee goes to his chest, I can usually do a pretty good job fighting in like so. Okay, now, all we've discussed thus far is getting to 2 hooks, but it's always possible as well during any of these transitions, okay? So we grab those cross wrists, okay, or the single wrist, and he's trying to stop me from strangling him, all right? It's always possible, potentially, go ahead and bring that knee to the chest, as you're trying to put that second hook in, to throw your leg across your training partner and lock your figure of 4. All it really takes is to create the gap with this foot and then pass this foot across, okay? Once we pass that foot across the hip, we're usually in a pretty good spot. Another thing we can do is start pushing the hips down the body, okay? When I'm in this position, I can post off of my training partner's hips and lower his legs to make it easier for me to put this in. So instead of just sliding this through, we're posting, extending, and physically pushing his body down. Again, we can do this with wrist grips as well, okay? Really pushing on the hip, lowering the body, making it easier for our body triangle to come in so it doesn't run into our training partner's defensive legs here, okay? So you have a lot of moving parts in terms of getting our feet in. But another one that's a little specific to the figure 4, talking about extending my training partner, is we can use a foot inside our training partner's shin to start pulling his knee away. So when his knee comes to his chest, I can slide my foot inside the shin bone like so, and I can extend it. Now the downside of this is the moment I let this go, knee will come to chest, right? So whether I have the arms restricted or not, okay, I'm going to have a tough time getting this hook in. So instead, I create that extension and I focus on winning the battle with this foot. So extend, put this across the hip. Once that's across the hip, we're in a great place to start the figure 4. So we have a fight going on mechanically to potentially extend my training partner with high ball ride and grips towards the top of my training partner's neck, okay? And if we ever have to backtrack because we feel as though we lost the high ball ride, we hit that figure 4. So that's one fight that's going on here, all right? Another fight is in terms of where we insert, okay? And as opposed to flicking a leg over, either inserting through the hip or pushing down the thigh, okay? And then another fight that we have going on is with our hands, our training partner's hands. As we go to try to get hooks in, he might try to block, at which point I could grab a wrist, threaten the strangle, okay, using the strangle to remove the hands, and then eventually place the hook in. Or another way to go about doing it is if my training partner ever reaches across, I reach down with this hand, okay, same sort of thing. I use a strangle again, or we get cross wrist grips, okay, and once again, opens up access to the hooks or a foot flaring across the hips where we could lock up that figure 4, all right? Of course, 2 hooks are good, figure 4 is good. It really depends on the organization you're competing for. Some organizations don't score the figure 4, so make sure that you're well aware of the rules of whatever competition you're competing in, so that you can, you can be focused on whatever is going to, score the most. All right, or at the very least, get to your scoring position first, and then switch to, what I would argue would be a much better control position, which would be the figure 4ing of the legs. So I'm going to show you guys an interesting transition to a position that I, just for this DVD, decided to name the hot seat. It's funny, sometimes I get people coming up to me asking questions about techniques, and they use names that we use for the DVDs. And sometimes I'm just coming up with a name for something. They're like, this technique. And I'm like, huh? But anyway, we're going to call this the hot seat for now. I think I'll remember just because it's a unique name. But basically, this is a situation where I have not scored hooks on my training partner, but I'm not quite in crab ride because my feet aren't behind my training partner's feet. So this position can start from crab ride. Don't get me wrong. Okay. This would be typically crab ride. What I'm going to refer to as the hot seat is a situation where I have a seat belt on my training partner. Okay. But my training partner is sitting and I am kneeling like so. Okay. Now, some of you may be thinking to yourself like, man, I almost never find myself in this position. Well, it's somewhat intentional. It's not really a situation you'll find yourself in unless you yourself put yourself there. But I probably said yourself way too many times. But it's important because I think it's very helpful for you to reestablish control over the back and start winning in some of these scramble situations where maybe you were losing control with the legs. This gives you an opportunity to put your training partner in a somewhat immobilized state. If I hold my training partner here and he tries to move from side to side, go ahead, like really try to turn. I can force my training partner onto his butt. I could even come into the standing position to make it worse. All right. In fact, most of the time I advocate for that. You're more mobile. It's harder for your training partner to move. I can put him under physical stress by bringing his hips back and tilting his chin forward as he goes to try to maneuver around now. Not only is it hard for him to move and recover, it often has to post on the mat. Okay, but it's just very uncomfortable. My training partner's chin is crunched towards his chest. People hate this. But it's way less of a scramble situation in terms of my training partner's ability to move than, for example, here, where at any point in time, if he hops his hips across, he can beat me. Go back. Or any other variation of this, where my hips are behind my training partner. At any point in time, he rolls, turns, faces me. All right, all of a sudden, he's recovering. If I can get to this position where my training partner is seated in front of me with a seatbelt and I'm on the knees or feet, go ahead and try and do all those things that you want to do. It's very challenging, okay? And I think if you start stressing getting to that position more during your scrambles in training before you even put hooks in, you're going to have a lot of success. Now, how do we kind of create that situation? Okay, where would something like that happen? Okay. One for sure is crab ride. Okay. If you're ever in a crab ride situation, it's not hard to get there. Okay. All you would really need to do, instead of playing a situation where you're trying to get your hooks in, I just start folding my legs behind me and I'm on my knees and then I'm on my feet. Okay. It's a simple get up. Okay. Feet in this position. I take one of them, put it behind me. All right. I use the other leg, sweep back like so. Okay. So all I'm doing is retracting one leg to get up to a knee. I can put weight on that knee and then retract the other leg. Okay. Retract up to a knee, retract. Okay. That's simple. There's probably other ways you could do it too. Sometimes I could put my feet behind my training partner. Okay. So instead of bringing my heel back like so, I can bring it to my butt and almost like a grappler's lift come up. So what that one looks like, instead of this and this, I bring this to the inside and behind, come up, and now I'm here. Okay. So anytime I'm in a crab ride, I have my choice to get into this position. I'm just kind of flick my legs back. Okay. And now I'm here, and usually as my training partner tries to move, I probably am going to apply tension in the standing position. Okay. How else might I end up getting to this position beside from a situation where I'm directly in crab ride? Okay. Let's say we're in a situation where maybe I have a hook in, whatever the case may be, on my training partner. Okay. From here, my training partner starts to escape. Okay. I'm going to bulk my training partner forward with my knee, and I'm going to slide my knees out behind my training partner and roll my shoulder behind my training partner's neck, forcing him into a seated position. Let's do the same thing on the other side. He starts ejecting. I bump my training partner. Now this time it's a little different. My head goes down to the mat, knee comes behind, and my shoulder curls behind. So let's look at these two situations. We had a hook in, he discards it, right? I bump. Why do I bump? Let's go back. Don't have to do it, but I think it's a good idea. Okay, if I don't bump and he quickly turns and faces me, he might slip the shoulder inside. The bump is to make it so that I have a brief second where he can't turn and face me. Just a brief second. That's all I need. Where I can get the shoulder behind his head and I can start walking my legs back. Now as he gets his back to the mat, I don't care. It doesn't help. I can put him right back in that situation. Same thing, other side. Okay, he discards. Now nice and easy. Okay, again, if I don't bump, there's a chance he faces me. So I do a little bump. Now I start to scissor my legs and put my head on the mat for base. Okay, from here, go ahead and try and fight. I just walk behind my training partner on the knees and I pull him into this position. Okay, so you can see that at a number of various points, okay, while I'm rolling around and my training partner's trying to evade hooks, etc., and fight, there's often opportunity to pull my training partner into what we're referring to as the hot seat here. Okay, my training partner sits in front of me. Okay, now what's relevant about this position, okay, other than the ability to control? Well, hopefully you can see it's pretty easy to just start stepping feet back over my training partner. Okay, like so. Sometimes the distraction of feet trying to step over my training partner fighting makes for a really easy transition to strangle. Okay, most of the time when we're taught, our instructors advocate for the idea of putting hooks in first, then strangling. It's a great way to go about it. I would never tell you that's a bad idea, but don't discount the idea of getting two arms wrapped around somebody's neck. Okay, you can absolutely do that and still finish your opponent even though you haven't placed two hooks in, or you can place the two hooks in after that strangle happens. So like I said, whether it's just a simple step between my training partner's legs, or as I'm trying to step and my training partner's defending, punching this arm across and locking up my figure of four, okay? Now, I don't have hooks, so what? Okay, I could strangle my training partner from here, and as he goes to try to move around, I'm probably going to get hooks in anyway, okay? You can play games with your training partner and transition other areas as well. Variations of katagatame, etc. Possibly even stepping over arms in situations where you might go into back triangles, all that good stuff. Okay, this DVD is about taking the back, so I'm not going to be overly concerned with what submissions you guys can transition to from there, but just know there's some good ones. All right. You can work to different additional forms of control where you control your training partner's arms as well. All right. Might make it easier to step over on one side. So we initially start doing things here. Okay. As I go to try to step, my training partner's blocking me, get a hold of one of your training partner's wrists. Now you know on that side, you're going to be in pretty good shape as far as stepping over your training partner's hips. Okay? Let's say he cross blocks me. Well, now we can kind of start reaching in, getting hold of our training partner's second arm in various ways. Okay? Same thing here. Okay? He starts blocking, etc. We can push arms down even, step over arms. So you have a lot of good offensive opportunity because you're hovering above your opponent. It's just like what we're usually talking about, where we take our training partner out of that defensive turtle and there's a big gap in front of him to throw hooks. The only difference is we're far more mobile now because we're up on our feet. Okay? And again, a lot of the control resides in this shoulder behind the neck in this position, keeping my training partner crunched. Anytime you get your training partner to post an arm as well, great time to either take it or step over it, right? To try to further take your training partners back with control. All right, so I strongly encourage you guys in various scramble situations in the sport to try to find yourself there. Again, it all comes from that seatbelt with a slide of the shoulder adjusted behind the neck. If I get a normal seatbelt on my training partner, so normal seatbelt where I'm centered, try to scoot away from me, like just walk away, right? The head can slip through, keep walking, right? No matter how tight I hold it, there's room there. It's a cinch shoulder behind, okay? So that even when my training partner's dead flat, okay, try to turn, very difficult. I'm going to walk my training partner right up from positions like this, okay? Start trying to incorporate that into your back-taking game. And I think you'll be able to recover from a lot of scramble situations that normally you might find difficult. All right, there's going to be a lot of times when you guys are trying to take your training partners back where, again, you don't have hooks in. Your training partner's doing a good job of scooting their hips out in different directions and making it difficult for you to maintain the back. So let's look at a situation where I have a body lock on my training partner, for example. Okay, we've just landed down on the mat from a takedown or something like that, and we're side by side. Now, I do have my training partner's back. I got an opportunity here to potentially take my training partner's back, but I can feel my training partner trying to face me, trying to get on top, etc. Okay? It's at this point I become responsible for shoveling my hips underneath my training partner, okay, in various ways. There's different ways to do it, okay? One way I can do it is with the use of a butterfly hook underneath my training partner's near knee, okay? As my training partner tries to turn towards me, I catch that knee with my foot, and I shovel my hips underneath my training partner as I extend my leg and bring my training partner out to the other side. As I do this, possibly establish a hook, bring my training partner back, establish another hook. Okay, but at the very least, I can keep the game going. Okay, come back up. Okay, so the idea here being, and this could happen from a seatbelt too. This wouldn't be wrong to do from a seatbelt, all right, or a claw, or any of these other grips that you might potentially have. Okay, using that foot to get underneath the knee. As he's turning, I lift my hips up and I start shoveling and bringing my training partner through. You could also potentially use your knees to set your training partner in crab ride situations from here. That wouldn't be wrong, but the point is I use that elevator underneath the knee to shovel underneath my training partner. Sometimes you'll be in a situation where maybe you landed partially on top and your training partner's turning towards you and your knee ends up behind. Okay, this is just a deeper shovel. Okay, from here, instead of working my way on top, which isn't wrong, okay, I can dive my head and my chest behind my training partner. I could use my knee as the shovel. Okay, when I use this particular technique, usually my training partner gets into a position where he's far across the body. So I tend to not go after the top. No, what are you doing? Sorry. I tend to not go after the top hook here. Okay, after I shovel my training partner through, I'll probably continue shoveling my hips underneath my training partner and try to look for that bottom hook as my training partner turns away. So if I have that knee-deep position and I rotate my training partner all the way through, all right, you're typically going to see me readjust my hips and get my knee back behind my training partner's hip after that one, okay? Because when I bring my training partner through for a knee-deep position, number one, this leg is dangling between his legs and potentially dangerous, okay? Number two, that hip is usually very high hip, right? It's hard to just establish a hook here. So when that hip is high, instead, I go after the inside hip. I scoot out, and I start to take the back like so. Another way that we can shovel, go back down to the mat. Okay, another way that we can shovel, let's say we missed this leg. This leg goes down to the mat. We can reach across for my training partner's far leg. Okay, and from here, I step towards my training partner and lift. Now, when we shovel like this, we already have a hook in. So we land in this position. So that's the beauty of that shovel. Go back, back hips to the mat. Okay, so anytime he's turning towards me and I miss this hook because the foot comes down to the ground, okay, he keeps turning towards me, I get the far hook. I get as close to him as possible. The farther I am away, the easier it'll be for him to recover. I get close to him, I try to wedge my head and chest underneath. I lift, bring my training partner through, lock up either the figure of four or high ball ride, then start adjusting my hand position, etc. Just getting used to the idea of shoveling your hips underneath your training partner, whether it be with an elevator as a foot, your knee, all right, or even your foot on your training partner's far hamstring in front, is another way that we can get back into a position where we can potentially take our training partners back. One of the things my training partner is always going to try to do is recover guard while I'm trying to take his back, okay? So my training partner will be on his knees and elbows, okay? And we get into situations where I'm about to try to take my training partner's back. It'll be often the case that my training partner turns towards us, right? Start to recover guard like so, okay? And as much as possible, and this is the easiest way for my training partner to, to do this, because my training partner doing a Granby roll or something like that. It's much more elaborate. It's tougher to follow, all these sorts of things. But it usually costs a little bit more energy, puts you in some more precarious positions. This costs him almost nothing, okay, as I'm trying to move behind him and he's trying to recover guard, okay? It's very low risk, very low energy. He literally just basically falls on his hip, okay? So it can be a very frustrating thing. So we want to have some ways that we could go about trying to keep my training partner in a situation where the back is exposed. Basically what we need is I need to make sure that my training partner's shoulders can't completely turn in these situations. So what's going to happen is I start to see my training partner start to sit in, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a hand across my training partner's two knees like so, okay? When I do this, it makes it much harder for my training partner to get a hold of me with his legs, okay? If he were to actually try to recover guard now that my hand is in this position, I'd end up in a situation where I can flatten my training partner out and pin him in side control, okay? So what this usually does is it puts your training partner in a bit of a dilemma where he says, I don't know how much I really want to fall to guard because I'm going to get my guard passed. Okay, so as he starts to fall and I shoot this across, he starts to try to come back up to his knees. And then as he comes back up to his knees, I can begin to recover. And this happens at various points. Okay, sometimes I'll feel this guard recovery happening as I spin around. Okay, no problem. I just put that arm in there as a jammer. Okay, my training partner has a choice. Yes, he could fall directly to his back. Okay, and I can take my training partner, or I can just pass my training partner, pin him from here. Okay, more than likely he won't want to be pinned. Okay, in which case he'll start turning back up, and then I have more opportunity to get to my training partner's back again. If you wanted to, of course, this would also offer you opportunities to attack front headlock. Okay, so your training partner comes around. Okay, I could potentially start going into Darsh transitions from there, trying to strangle my training partner. But again, this video is mainly centered around the idea of trying to take my training partners back. But I think this is a very valuable strategy for you guys. Anytime you're trying to move around your training partner and they just try to cut into guard, that hand has to come down to the floor in front of your training partner's legs. And it now forces them to think about their actions. Do I want to not get my back taken so bad that I'm willing to give up a pin? And the answer for most people is no, okay? At which point it allows you to continue trying to take the back, okay? And this can happen from any number of positions. Sometimes even as you're threatening, guard passing your training partner, you can use this tactic to make it very difficult for your training partner to recover guard. But specifically, I'm showing it to you guys in the context of being on someone's back, them just falling over and making sure that they're not just going to lock up a quick half guard right away or full guard and put you in a situation where, you no longer have dominant control. At least if you end up in the pin, you're in a good spot, okay? But hopefully they come right back up to their knees. You get to take their back. One thing that we can add to our ability to stick the arm across our training partner's legs to stop him from recovering guard is a grip underneath my training partner's far shoulder. It makes this move even stronger. All right, so I get into this position. He starts trying to recover guard. I get that hand, and this is the most important hand. But if I can ever shoot under the far shoulder, it makes it even stronger. Now when he tries to bring his back flat to the floor, he doesn't even really have that option anymore. He's kind of forced to come back up into the knees and back in front headlock situation where I can either regain my attempts at taking his back or attempt front headlock attacks. Sometimes you can even perform a really cool movement here, whereas your training partner goes, I'm going to adjust position. Whereas your training partner goes to try to recover guard. So let's start with I'm behind him, so I'm not cheating. Okay, he goes to recover guard, and that arm comes across, and that hand covers his shoulder. As your training partner's fighting to recover, even as he goes to try to step back in, we step towards our training partner's hamstring. Knee comes behind. Then we can take the back like so. Okay, so I'll do that again, a couple different angles. I'm here, whatever position I was in, and I see my training partner trying to sit. I go hand across the hips, hand under the shoulder, okay? He tries to go flap, difficult, okay? As he's fighting in this position, if I can step my leg up between my training partner's legs and slide my other knee behind his back, I can often re-expose my training partner's back here pretty easily. Now, it'll be hard sometimes to get that far shoulder if they sit to their, kind of sit to their shoulder quickly. But a lot of times when people do this, they do it propped up on one arm. If he ever does that, he'll be opening himself up for me to reach underneath that shoulder pretty easily. And as we discussed earlier, hard for him to really screw around and break that grip effectively the same way that when I just get a chin strap, okay? So hand across, far shoulder, step between your training partner's legs, and retake the back. One of the most effective ways your training partner is going to look to recover from bad position where his back is being exposed is to Granby or half Granby, okay? What is a Granby and what is a half Granby? My training partner perform a half Granby, recovers guard. So he rolls over his shoulder on the side that I'm on, his feet come in, okay? So that's a guard recovery. It's not great, okay? Another way is a full Granby where he rolls across his shoulders up to his knees and then typically faces me. That one was a little extra. Chris likes to try to break dance, so I don't know what happened there, but you get the idea. Okay, he's going to try to pop up to his knees and face me. Whenever this sort of thing happens, I lose control over my training partner, sometimes in a dramatic fashion. I get thrown to the mat and stuff, and my training partner either gets out or recovers guard. Either way, I don't have a look at his back anymore. That's very frustrating, not something I'm interested in. So let's talk about some ways we can follow our training partner's Grammys and maintain a possibility of taking it back in the future. All right, so like I said, he'll always do the Granby on the side that I'm on. If he were to try to Granby on the far side, it's usually pretty difficult, and it's easy for me to collapse my training partner. If he tries to do something like that, go ahead. All right, I would be able to just crush my training partner's hips and possibly claw grip, retake the back, etc. Okay, it's not a very comfortable thing for my training partner to Granby on the outside. Okay, so my training partner is always going to start his Granby on this inside shoulder. Okay. So this arm's either tucks between my legs or to the outside. It's his choice, right? And then he's going to start trying to perform his movement, okay? Another thing, go back. He won't be doing this when you have a seatbelt. If he does this when you have a seatbelt, he almost always just gives you the back, okay? So this will be an effective technique typically when I have a tight waist with one hand or two hands locked around my training partner's waist. So anytime we're below the shoulders with both arms, typically this can be effective technique. It's also not particularly effective when you have a claw grip. So these are things to consider. There are grips that make it so that it's harder for my training partner to perform this move. Now, if I want to follow my training partner when he goes to do this, there's a few different ways I could go about doing it. Okay, go ahead and go for your Granby. Okay, one way I could go about doing it, I can post with one hand. And as I post with that hand, I want to follow my training partner's hips the same direction they're going to go. Here's the direction they're going to go. Okay, let's go back. So when I let go ahead, I go the same direction. Then I stay behind my training partner. That time I let go with two hands. Okay, you could do it with one hand as well, but we're doing it in slow motion, so it made it a little bit awkward. Okay, let's just commit to the roll. Okay, and I'm able to stay behind my training partner with one hand. You do it with two hands, but obviously potentially lose control a little bit more than if you let go with just one hand. Okay, another way, good way to go about doing this is to use your inside arm to guide your training partner's hips through. Okay, so as my training partner begins his roll, I take this hand and I lift the hips. Go ahead and keep trying to roll. I force him through with that hand. Okay. I'm not going to do this, but some people can, okay? I don't really like smashing myself on top of my own head. You can post your head on the mat. I'll do it with one hand so you can see what I would do here. You can keep your hands connected and kind of touch the mat with your head. Go ahead and continue your roll and follow your training partner this way. You can do that with connected hands. I didn't demonstrate it because I don't feel like getting smashed on the top of my head. Some people don't mind though, all right, and they do it. So that's another good potential option. Well, you know, if you're very bold, I guess, and have a hard head. Another great option to follow my training partner is movement of my head. Now, there's a downside to this one, which we'll discuss in a minute. Okay, when I connect my arms and I feel my training partner's rolling, I just take my head and I put it on the same side of his shoulder. Go ahead. When I do this, I end up following my training partner, and I don't risk like smashing my face on the floor or anything because my head penetrates underneath my training partner's hip. Okay? The downside of this move is that potentially can open up a whizzer situation for your training partner. So as he goes to roll, and I put my head here, as we land, because my head's on this side, he can whizzer me. Okay? And it makes it harder to take the back later. All right? But it's not impossible. there's still plenty of good things that you can do from that position to expose the back. So I don't consider it a complete loss. Okay, now everything that we just did down on the ground, you can do 4-point and you can do standing. So we'll just briefly demonstrate it. 4-point. Okay, same thing. Okay, my training partner decides to roll. I can let go with one hand, follow my training partner, and get behind. Okay, training partner decides to roll from 4-point again. Okay, this time, all right, I let go with both hands and I connect to his hip with this hand. Go ahead. And I guide my training partner through, and I'm ready to take the back. Okay, now the head handstand version, probably not a good idea as you start to rise in height, so I'm not going to demonstrate that, nor do I think you should even really do it. Okay, but if you want to keep your hands connected, again, follow his hips. Take your head and put it to the same side. Ready, go. And now you might get wizard, okay, but there's options to control wrists, break people down, okay, and even still take the back from positions like that. Legs standing. Same thing. We're here. The guy goes for that Granby. And hold on with one hand. I could let go and guide with the inside hand. Good. And I can hide my head inside the hip. And get behind. Okay, if you want to eliminate the chances of getting wizard there, just get your head behind your training partner's back very quickly. All right, and you'll have less of a shot or less of a chance of your training partner putting you in that wizard position and further preventing the back. Okay, so again, anytime our training partner's ramping, we could use any of those techniques to stay behind our training partner and get ready to take the back. So one of the things that we're going to have to worry about in terms of my training partner rolling is defending against makikomi rolls. We discussed it a little bit briefly in some other videos, but I wanted to cover a little bit more in depth some of the things that we can do. Okay, so my training partner gets into position. Now, makikomi rolls are available basically anytime an arm reaches across my training partner's body. Even with seatbelt grip, you know, unlike Granbys, which, you know, is pretty tough to do with the seatbelt. Even with a seatbelt, if I'm like perpendicular with my training partner and he goes to row, like I'm still getting sent across my training partner, and there's a good chance I don't get to have my training partner's back anymore. So the only grip that I can think of that just makes it harder, like considerably harder to hit a makikomi would be like a claw grip. You know, so I guess if you were going against a makikomi specialist, it's pretty hard for him to hit from positions like this, right? Even as he hits it, like I still kind of have an ability to shovel my hips underneath my training. He can still hit the move, but I still feel like I have a shot at taking the back. But yeah, almost everything else that I do, tight waist, you know, with one hand, seatbelt, all those things, even just reaching across, you know, offer my training partner that arm. And we talked about kind of the depth of the hand is kind of the deciding factor in how easy it is for my training partner to pull this off. So, you know, as long as I keep this hand short, okay, pretty hard for my training partner to make this work. The moment I start really trying to control the hips, obviously even with locked hands, you know, we're going to have some trouble. Now, one thing we can do is something that we discussed in other videos, which is just following my training partner with my hips, okay? So if my training partner tries to do this move, even with locked hands here, and I do a good enough job, go ahead and try to hit the move, of getting my knees behind my training partner and shoveling underneath my training partner like so, it's pretty tough for my training partner to get anything advantageous out of this. But there are going to be times when your training partner traps this arm and you know that it's too late to get your hips behind your training partner. You're about to head towards the floor, and like right about here, you go, man, there's no way I can get my knee behind my training partner. Let's go back. So in situations where I feel as though I'm compromised and he got the beat on me, I know I can't just jump behind his hips. That's going to be the main way that I do it. I'm going to try to link into my training partner's other arm and put him in a crucifix if I can. Okay. So anytime I go to move around and I feel that makikomi coming, I go hand inside my training partner's forearm and knee inside the elbow. So pop up just for a second so they can see. Post, knee inside the elbow. Now as my training partner rotates me through for makikomi, I have a shot at trapping his other arm with my legs. Okay, and now his makikomi roll turns into my back taking opportunity. Okay, we'll talk about how to maneuver to the back from crucifix later, but it's really not too difficult. You're obviously still on your training partner's back, but you'll be controlling your training partner with the arms instead of the feet inside the hips. Okay, but this is how we kind of stay behind somebody. Even if you didn't do most of the conventional things that we would do from crucifix, just getting to this position stops him from moving for a second. Go ahead and try and turn side to side. Difficult. And you could even just go into simple things like getting your shoulder behind the head and starting to walk your training partner back into that seated position like we talked about, all right, to start recovering. So even if you weren't going to do anything with the crucifix, there's like a lot of good ways to just get back behind your training partner and take the back. Okay, let's look at this one last time. Whatever position I might be in, 4-point makes this exceptionally more difficult because you're going from a much higher height, but you can still pull off the move. Okay, we're here. Okay, I feel my training partner trapped. Just get a thumb inside and a knee inside and look to trap that far shoulder. Okay, now we can play around from Kikimura crucifix, regular crucifix, seatbelt crucifix, whatever the case may be. And as our training partner tries to struggle, more than likely, we got another shot at taking this guy's back in the future if we can get to that crucifix position. If you don't get to the crucifix position, you're probably going to be in a situation where the guy gets on top of you. Okay, definitely don't want that to happen. One vulnerability of being behind your training partner trying to take their back is often your training partner's ability to enter into your legs. Okay, definitely something we want to avoid. I want to avoid any situation where I'm very close to good offense and my training partner can all of a sudden throw me into a defensive situation. And a leg attack is a good way to do that. In my most recent fight, it's a perfect example. Training partner behind me in a rear body lock, I roll into his legs. All of a sudden the fight's over, right? Definitely don't want something like that happening as we're trying to pursue somebody's back. So let's talk about the basics here. You show your ass to the camera. Knees and elbows. All right. So first things first, in a turtle situation, okay, placing my foot here definitely makes me more vulnerable, okay? Now, I say that, but I also taught you guys a technique where you do that, okay? It doesn't mean you can never do this. Just know that if you got a guy that enters the legs from this position, you're more vulnerable in a position like this, okay? So if you're really worried about somebody trying to get a hold of your feet, just go ahead and roll through to get a hold of the leg, right? If you're really worried about something like that happening, don't put your foot there, okay? There are other good options. There are other good options to take the back with your foot on the outside, or you could even step your foot over both legs, potentially. Okay, these two foot placements will keep you relatively safe. Of course, your training partner can adjust, and they can try to find that foot position again, right? It's not impossible. Okay, even stepping on the Achilles, the foot can slide off. Okay, you're not perfectly safe there, but that definitely limits the exposure. So foot on Achilles, foot on either side is probably a better idea, just structurally speaking, when we're in these positions. Now, he moves up to 4-point. Okay, same thing, except I would argue even more important, okay? We get into situations like this and we hang out too long, it's very easy for my training partner to enter my legs, okay? So when my training partner gets into 4-point position, I would absolutely advocate for, at the very least, to just have that rear leg back a little bit. It can be somewhat between the legs, but don't stand directly behind people like this. This is definitely not a good idea. More than likely, somewhere out here, even if you're splitting legs for whatever technique you're going to do, no problem. Either out or even completely in front of your training partner makes it way more difficult for your training partner to do anything involving the leg. Okay? Standing position. Okay? You can see now, so I don't have to have Chris show you his ass. All right? Standing position is the same sort of thing. It's a little tougher, because you're not controlling your training partner in a way where if you stand completely to the side of your training partner, he'll just whizzer you, right? So it's hard to just keep your legs completely out of the way. You could also get tossed and thrown and things from this position. So can't really fully protect yourself, but by leaving one leg, splitting your training partner's legs like this is when you're most vulnerable, okay? So my recommendation is that you follow relatively square behind your training partner until it's time to do something. I can step a leg in the center of my training partner's legs if it's time to sweep him. If I go step and then go, no problem. Okay, but if I'm lingering here with a leg inside my training partner's hips for long periods of time, this is no good. I can be here. I can be somewhat out to the side. When I'm out to the side, if your head's here, you'll get wizards. So your head has to come somewhat across the body in positions like this if you want to leave your feet in a safe position. Okay? Now, another thing that we can start to do from any of these positions that reduce the exposure, even as my training partner is reaching for legs. Okay, so let's say we got caught sleeping a little bit. Leg was in the center, no problem. We use our feet behind our training partner's calf muscles to make life more difficult for him. I start to see this guy entering my legs, and I put a foot across like so. This is probably best case scenario, okay? Because this takes the situation and makes it so pretty much both legs are safe. You can just get one leg in, okay? And when your training partner goes to try to roll, and it's going to make things difficult, I'll let you do it. Go ahead and roll into my legs. I'll even follow, okay? I have a wedge inside, and I can kind of protect myself from situations like this, okay, at the very least. Okay, so any amount of putting feet inside the knees, whether it's this one, okay, or this one, is going to be particularly helpful, okay? Down on the knees, or 4-point even, 4-point, same kind of story. Your training partner's in this position. You feel him about to dive for the legs. That foot hides on either side to make it harder for my training partner to enter into my legs. Okay, and even if he succeeds in grabbing the hamstrings, rolling, etc., go ahead. When we land, he ends up with a foot stuck, and I have a shot at maybe elevating, getting on top of him, etc. Okay, so really finding ways to hide your feet to the best of your ability is in your best interest. Again, full stand, we already did standing position, I think. Down in turtle position. Okay, turtle position, it's a little trickier, okay, but still can be done. I feel my training partner starting to try to roll, right? It's hard probably to get the toes of this leg as he goes to roll over anything, but if I can, I will. But you could also use this leg. So he rolls, and even if he kind of gets a hold of it, keep trying to expose. I can lift that leg up, get 2 feet in, make my training partner's job difficult, okay? So using our feet inside our training partner's knees. And you do this in, whether you realize it or not, in many, situations involving leg pommeling. Let's say my training partner's going for a knee bar, something like this, on top of me, right? You'll see people wedge their feet in and start to fight from positions like this. It's fairly common, okay? But just put it into context when you're trying to take somebody's back. Okay, you're going to be thinking about doing the same thing. If you can avoid the situation altogether by removing the feet, awesome. Okay, also just frustrating your training partner's balance is another part of all of this as well. If you're constantly knocking your training partner's hands to the floor and he's very off balance, it's harder for somebody to do this. The more static you make this position, the more you just kind of stop moving and wait, the more likely it is that your training partner can get into your legs, okay? So keep weight on your training partner, keep off balance in them, harass your training partner's feet, be active in these situations, and you'll have way less of a problem with your training partner entering into your legs while you're on their back. So one more relevant thing, we kind of mentioned it, but I want to add one more thing to it. My training partner's knees and elbows are down on the mat. Whenever he wants to roll into my legs, one way that you can also be very effective in preventing this is with claw grips or Darce katagatame entries, okay? So anytime I'm in a situation where I start to see that somebody might enter into my leg and I get a deep claw here as he goes to try to enter the legs, it's very, very difficult, okay? If I was in a similar situation and I decided to put this arm through, it would also be effective. It's often just way more difficult to do that as my training partner's trying to roll into my legs. Go ahead. Because this hand feels farther away, but it would absolutely make it difficult, all right, for your training partner to finish his leg lock entry, and you might end up in situations where you could actually strangle, okay? So let's look at this again, okay? Even 4-point, right? The legs in between, I start seeing going in for my legs, and then just get that claw in there, okay? The Darce is probably, again, for a 4-point position, is probably going to be a lot more difficult to hit, all right? But anytime you see your training partner going in for those legs, all right, we got that claw grip to meet our training partner and make it so much easier to defend. Even if he successfully gets a hold of the legs, go ahead, roll through, do your thing. Okay, it's just super easy to start forcing my legs to the mat, end up in that katagatame situation, okay? So anytime you see your training partner going after your legs, okay, good claw grip situation or Darce, will tend to solve the problem and put them in further submission danger in the future.